that is very disturbing. And I'm not saying that anything Dr. Ben Carson said was incorrect. But on Hannity last night, Dr. Carson likened homosexuality to pedophilia and bestiality. Now again, and I want to be very specific here, this is the way I put it at teapartycommunity.com. Dr. Carson will not be able to run for president now. Do not misunderstand. He is right about this. Homosexuality is sexual depravity, as defined by the Bible, even if it is consensual. It doesn't matter that there are victims involved in pedophilia and that the victims are children. I understand that on an earthly level, that's a much worse crime. But in terms of sin, sexual sin, homosexuality is sinful. Just as sinful as bestiality, just as sinful as pedophilia. But if Dr. Carson had any notion of running for president, he cannot liken those three to each other. He can't do it on television. He can't do it anywhere. I'm afraid that Dr. Carson running for president, the idea of Dr. Ben Carson running for president as a Republican, is over. And again, I want to be very clear. He is not wrong. But he is not going to be able to run for president. I would love for him to run for president. But it's not going to happen now. Because this is forever on his record. And you've got practically all liberal Democrats, many independents, most moderates, and a good number of Republicans who believe that homosexuality is okay. That homosexuality is just another kind of normal. So here's the audio a night or two ago. Here's Dr. Carson with Sean Hannity.
Last question. We have the issue of the Supreme Court dealing with two issues involving gay marriage. I've asked you a lot of questions. I've never asked you that. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a well-established fundamental pillar of society. And no group, be they gays, be they NAMBLA, be they people who believe in bestiality, it doesn't matter what they are, they don't get to change the definition. So it's not something that's against gays, it's against anybody who wants to come along and change the fundamental definitions of pillars of society. It has significant ramifications.
All right, again, Dr. Carson here is completely correct. And yet, he can't say it. If he wants to run for president, he can't say it. If he wants to go on Sean Hannity and be a commentator, he can say it. But you can't run for president and equate homosexuality with pedophilia and bestiality. Christians and conservatives who want to run for public office have got to be very wise. The Bible calls it wise as a serpent. You need to be able to think ahead and not torpedo yourself the way Dr. Carson has. And again, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm not saying he's stupid. I'm not saying anything like that at all. I have enormous respect for the man. But the simple fact is, you can't say that. Here he is on MSNBC with Andrea Mitchell, apologizing and kind of explaining himself. I'm not going to play the whole thing because, to be quite frank, it gets pathetic.
Now the celebrated neurosurgeon is also under fire for comments this week on same-sex marriage, telling Sean Hannity on Fox, quote, "My thoughts are that marriage is between a man and a woman. It is a well-established fundamental pillar of society, and no group, be they gays, be they NAMBLA, be they people who believe in bestiality, it doesn't matter what they are, they don't get to change the definition," close quote. And joining me now is Dr. Ben Carson, Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital and a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President George W. Bush. Thanks very much for joining us. I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, why you have ventured into politics, and then about your views on same-sex marriage.
Yeah, well, first of all, they are my views that should be mentioned. They're not the views of the institution. You know, if someone goes back and examines what I've been talking about and writing about over the last couple of decades, It's the same things that I'm talking about now. It's just that now more people are paying attention to them. And, I think, in terms of what was said on Sean Hannity's show, that was taken completely out of context and completely misunderstood in terms of what I was trying to say. As a Christian, I have a duty to love all people, and that includes people who have other sexual orientations, and I certainly do, and never had any intention of offending anyone. What I was basically saying, and if anybody was offended, I apologize to you, but what I was basically saying is that there is no group. I wasn't equating those things. I don't think they're equal. Just, if you asked me for an apple and I gave you an orange, you would say, well, that's not an orange. And then I say, well, there's a banana. That's not an apple either. And there's a peach. That's not an apple either. But it doesn't mean that I'm equating the banana and the orange and the peach. And in the same way, I'm not equating those things. My point was that once we start changing the definitions, then where do we stop? We can go with anything. And I certainly don't have any problem with people who are gay having legal arrangements. In fact, any two adults, gay, straight, whatever. Certainly they can have legal arrangements so that they can share property and have inheritance rights and visitation rights. That's a kind thing to do.
Okay, so now he's got to grovel and talk about how open he is to any kind of relationship between two adults. Two adults, he said. So how about father and daughter? Or aunt and nephew? Whatever. Aunt and niece. I mean, any two adults? Really? Really? And we're not going to call it marriage. And as long as we don't call it marriage, it's okay. No, it's not. We're getting into a whole area of self-deception here, saying that all we care about is whether or not homosexuals call it marriage. And by the way, if you gave homosexuals, I came up with a word on Facebook, igerum. Instead of calling it marriage, when two homosexuals want to have a marriage-like ceremony and they want to call themselves married, instead of calling it married, we'll spell the word backwards and call it igerum. Oh, this guy and this guy got igerummed. We'll just give them a new word. It would never suffice. If you gave them a new word and you gave them every opportunity and every freedom and every advantage that people get when they're married, they would not be happy. This is not about getting married. This is not about acceptance of homosexual marriage. This is about spitting in the face of God. This is about forcing churches to marry homosexuals. And if churches do not marry homosexuals, then they will be labeled as bigots, and they will probably have their charity status, the 501c3 status, removed. This is another reason why I think that churches should just get rid of, many churches should simply get rid of the charity status and speak what's on their mind. Talk about anything from the pulpit without fear of having your charity status removed. But that's what the ultimate goal is. You can give homosexuals all of the rights afforded to married people and call it something different. Call it civil unions, call it igerum, call it anything you want. They won't be happy until they can spit in the face of God and force churches to marry them. Not just homosexual accepting churches, but all churches who are now against homosexual marriage. That's the goal. And they're not going to stop until they force churches who don't want to marry them to marry them. And I really wish that Dr. Carson had not gone as far as he did. Once again, he's completely correct. But you can't say that. I can say it because I'm here on my show. But if I ran for president, if I ran for senator or for Congress, in any office at all, and somebody came across one of these shows where I likened homosexuality to pedophilia and bestiality, I'd probably be done.
The Jimmy Z Show.